Hello, everybody. It is the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. Thank you for watching. We are awaiting the President of the United States, Joe Biden, to come and speak live on the latest on what's happening with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. President Biden was announced to speak at 12:45 and has not started speaking yet. And we will go to that as soon as he does begin speaking. In the meantime, I want to touch on a couple of things that are going. What do you say, Thunder? Thanks for watching. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to touch on a couple of things here before we get to the president. A couple of things that are going on here in the United States that we need to draw some attention to. Headlines on CNN: U.S. is preparing significant new sanctions on Russia. Biden to address the Ukraine crisis today as the White House shifts to call Putin's move. They're actually using the term invasion. Ahmaud Arbery, his killers have been found guilty on all counts of a hate crime in federal court. Racist messages were key evidence in the hate crimes trial. Ahmaud Arbery's mom happy about the verdict, angry at the Department of Justice. And closing arguments have begun in the civil rights trial of the three ex-officers who watched as Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd. The Supreme Court has officially ended Trump's legal fight to block any document turnover to the January 6th probe. So basically, the Supreme Court has said the congressional probe of Donald Trump's responsibility for the attempted insurrection on January 6th, that he is not exempt from turning over his documents. So just some things I wanted to draw attention to before we get going here. And this is what happened in Berlin last night when Putin announced that that he had recognized the two breakaway areas of Ukraine. A large protest in Berlin at the gates of the Russian embassy there. So still awaiting. Actually, I didn't show you that. I got to share this to show you. So this is what was going on last night outside the embassy in Russia, or in Berlin, outside the Russian embassy. You can hear the chant, "Stand with Ukraine." Again, that was in Berlin last night in front of the embassy. We're at the Washington Post site now. Let me flop back over here to StreamYard and say hello to everybody. Hi, Sissy. Hello, everybody watching. Again, we're waiting on remarks from President of the United States, Joe Biden, in regards to potential sanctions on Russia for invasion of Ukraine. It has not been, just to be clear, it has not been, there have been no missiles fired. There have been no rockets fired. There is not a full-scale invasion. A portion of Ukraine that has been disputed since 2014. A lot of pro-Russian separatists there. That is the area that Russian troops have moved into and have been in. So the question becomes: is this a refortification of an area that Russia has already been occupying, or is this an invasion of new territory? And it's a it's something that is splitting hairs, but it's important on the world stage as far as who is to blame for what happens when it does happen. Um, T-Rex, how you doing, man? Uh, Michael's in prison, ex-cop father and son playing cop. Can you say bent over? T-Rex. Thunder, this is scary. I've spoken with 3 people today who knew absolutely nothing. I've talked to a lot of people, and I said, they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm pretty in-depthly covering the Russian invasion of Ukraine potentially." And it's like, why? What's going on? So, yeah, that's why I love the viewers of this channel, because they stay informed. They know what's up in their communities, in their states, in their countries, and in the world. And a lot of people don't have any clue that we could potentially, and this will sound hyperbole, but we could potentially be at the beginning of a 3rd World War, the way things are lined up. I definitely hope not. You'll see a lot of commentators with their hair on fire screaming, "Oh, that's and all that does is add to the tension. In my opinion, all that does is get people and while we need to be aware, there's no point in going blah yet. We're not at that point. We're still at the point where we've got to watch what's going on, and we've got to be aware of what's going on, but not overreact to what's going on. Okay. What's going on potentially could be devastating to the world. We do not know that yet. And people that are saying this is, this is the scariest thing that's ever happened to them, I wonder how long they've been around. But it is scary. And it's scary how many people don't know potentially what could happen, because it's scary because it can escalate so very quickly. If the wrong thing is said, if the wrong action is taken, escalation can happen very quickly, simply because of the amount of personnel that Russia has encircled around Ukraine, and the fact that we still have a lot of assets in the area. On last night's live, I said, that there would be no U.S. troops in there. And I said, chances are there are special forces already in Ukraine. They're just not public about it. I heard a report this morning. There were special forces in there. They have been withdrawn to Romania and Poland and are poised on the border to go in and help extract key personnel if necessary. That was a report I got from one of the people that send me stuff. And I appreciate all the people that send me stuff. You don't see them on the show. You don't know about them, but I'm blessed to have, in my past, have done a lot of things, and I've got a lot of contacts in a lot of different areas. So we still have internet. That's a good sign. Yes, it is a good sign. Because I think if the United States honks Russia off enough, if the United States does something so that Putin deems so dire that he has to act against the United States, they're not going to start lobbing missiles at the United States. Russia is not going to start ballistic missile launches. They will do cyber attacks. They will take down and it's not going to be cyber attacks taking down Facebook or taking down, it's going to be a cyber attack on our vulnerable areas, which are our infrastructures. We have a very vulnerable electrical system. And if you take down power, of course, the internet goes down. So we're at 102, and Biden was supposed to start speaking at 12:45. Let's see what the Washington Post is saying.
Attacks, right? And we did see some cyber attacks in Ukraine. How much of this is like a land war, and how much of this is a war of power and all of the things that people rely on, whether we're talking about electrical grids, whether we're talking about access to banks, etc.
That's what I was just talking about.
Who was the former prime minister, is still in government, was basically president during the period when Putin wasn't, but Putin was still pulling the strings. He tweeted today, after the Germans put a hold on Nord Stream 2, that Europeans can expect to start paying through the nose for gasoline, that everything is going to be costly. And basically, he made explicit the idea that Nord Stream 2 was always about Russian economic control over Europe. The Biden administration, to their credit, has been trying to coordinate gas supplies so that Europe will not be short on energy once Nord Stream 2 is down. And that's one of the ways diplomatically behind the scenes they were able to.
Nord Stream 2 is a pipeline that goes from Germany under the water and around the Baltics and comes out in the northern part of Russia. Germany announced that they have shut that pipeline down and no more crude oil or gasoline will be flowing into Germany or into Russia. Now, while I say, don't set your hair on fire, don't panic, at the same time, we've got to be aware that things like this are precursors to major conflicts, potentially.
He already made his decision irrespective of that. And now this speech from the president that we're about to see is incredibly important, because it will show that there actually will be costs. Because so often when Putin has been really aggressive and violated norms, he has merely faced a slap on the wrists.
Rhonda, let's talk about President Biden and how he's been handling this so far. Talk to us about the White House strategy of being very transparent about what they know, as far as we know. And also, we saw him do a press conference a couple of weeks ago where he sounded a lot more like the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee than perhaps a president. So talk to us about sort of the Biden approach here.
Yeah, if you think back to early January when he had that first press conference of the year, and he was asked about Ukraine, there were brief comments. Everyone was sort of waiting to see what was happening next. And over the past month and the last few weeks, you've seen his communication on the issue sort of increase.
I'm going to mute that for a minute and waiting on, again, if you're just joining us, thanks for watching. We are waiting for President Biden to give his talk. I'm going to pop back over to the comments real quick. Thunder, do you remember when the IRS got hacked? The pipeline was hacked. Airlines were having issues. Yeah, it will be things. It will be things like that, only on a larger scale. T-Rex, the average citizen of Russia fundamentally has the cyber knowledge to hack U.S. entities. That's probably true too. Again, I think we are very vulnerable, and we've left ourselves vulnerable because of ego, because we deemed ourselves as we're the only superpower. We rule the world. USA, USA, USA. And we are very vulnerable. We just lost a war in Afghanistan. Okay. Now you can debate, technicalities. Oh, well, we withdrew and we did, Trump announced the withdrawal and Biden carried it out and it was time for us to get out of there. We got out of there with the loss of a whole bunch of American lives and a whole bunch of American dollars and gained absolutely nothing. Okay, that's the bottom line. So while we deem ourselves to have the greatest military in the world, we got beat by Afghanistan. Just saying. God bless our troops. Absolutely, Truck. And now Biden has said no troops. Biden has said there won't be any troops. Any U.S. troops in. Well, of course, we know that there were special forces in there. And as I said, it's publicly stated that they've been out. They've been withdrawn today. They were there last night when I said they were there. They're out today. We won't put troops in there more than likely. We're going to be using our aircraft, our ballistic missiles, our Navy, but there should not be troops on the ground. But that doesn't mean that the troops in Poland and Romania will not be used. That, just at this time, there will be no troops on the ground. I'm curious as to what's held Biden up. The original schedule was he was going to speak at 12:45. It's now 1:07. Let's hop back over to see what's being said here on the Washington Post.
Military. They didn't do that here. And notably, that was a real 180 from how the Obama administration, where remember, of course, the president was the vice president, was very reluctant to talk about what it knew Russia was doing with regards to the invasion and subsequent annexation of Crimea. And we'll remember there as well.
That was 2014,
Russia tried to deny
8 years ago.
they even had troops in Crimea on that peninsula. But of course, they were special forces there, not wearing insignia. It was a pretty laughable cover that they tried to run. The United States knew that, and it could have disclosed information that would have shown a spotlight on what Russia was up to, and they didn't. Total reversal here, and everything that you've seen in the Biden administration's strategy has been all, I think, aimed at deterrence, but also trying to gather European allies together in a kind of show of will that if Putin did invade, as of course the White House had been predicting, and now it looks like accurately he would, that the response would be unified and severe. It appears unified today. How severe it is another question. So we've kind of now moved past that intelligence and kind of information shaping stage where the White House got.
On that point, there are a lot of opinions, both from Republicans and Democrats, that what Biden is planning is not enough. It's soft. It's Putin's going to view it as weak and just continue to take advantage. We'll see how it plays out.
Let's hear what the German chancellor announced today. Olaf Scholz has made a decisive move, and one that had been threatened in advance, and he has put on hold the certification of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Here he is speaking to reporters in Berlin this morning.
I have asked the German Economy Ministry today to withdraw the report on the analysis of energy supply guarantees from the regulator. It sounds technical, but it's the required procedure so that there can be no certification of the pipeline now.
The decision is sure to please Washington. Successive US administrations have opposed the pipeline, saying it makes Europe dangerously dependent on Russian supplies. Nord Stream 2 was also strongly opposed by Ukraine, which earns transit fees from the current line running through its...
Just to be clear, while the fuel may not flow into Europe from Russia, China's going to buy all the fuel Russia can sell. So again, when I say sanctions are not going to be a deterrent, when I say that the former Soviet Union, won't take them seriously, that's one of the reasons why.
From Reuters, let's go to James Homan for more on this. This had been threatened, but it is a significant decision and a significant move. Now, there's the question, of course, of how long everything's on hold, right? I mean, is this a permanent stop, or is this temporary? What are your thoughts?
It's temporary.
It really depends. I believe on how
it's temporary. If Putin pulls out, everything goes back to normal, and that's going to be the carrot and the stick. Okay, if you remove all your forces and you agreed to allow Ukraine to become part of NATO, that's the big sticking point. Ukraine wants to be part of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and NATO wants Ukraine part of NATO. Russia has said Ukraine will never be part of NATO. Part of that comes from the fact that Russia wanted to join NATO, and the United States basically said, no, we don't really want you. If you look at it from the Russian point of view, that's a slap in the face, and that could be something that Putin's been holding on to for all these years.
To disentangle their economy this much from the Russians.
Rhonda, let's talk about the appetite of Americans to see President Biden sort of make these moves. Now, we've been told by the president not to expect any boots on the ground. He doesn't want to see sort of a ground war between Americans and Russians. But what is the sense of Americans versus members of Congress who are talking about aggressive sanctions?
I was just
this is
mentioning
something that I've been looking into in my own reporting, and from a few recent polls, it suggests that many Americans do not have the appetite to go into any sort of conflict, even if that means even that outside conflict outside of Ukraine. Even
most Americans aren't even aware there is a potential conflict.
Don't feel that we should be involved. And there were two recent polls that come to mind. One was a recent Quinnipiac poll that asked Americans, do you think we should be involved? And over 50% said no. And then there was also a CBS poll that had very similar responses. I think it was 53% said that we should not be involved. So that's a little over half of the American public polled there. And this is something I talked to with Representative Mike Quigley. He is the co-chair of the Ukraine caucus.
Just to be clear here real quick, I'm not on the StreamYard page, so I can't see comments at the moment. Just to be clear here real quick, she said 53% of the American public doesn't want a conflict. And that's not necessarily accurate, because she's citing Quinnipiac, a polling organization. I was in politics, okay? And I don't have a lot of faith in polling organizations. Quinnipiac had me winning. So I don't have a lot of faith in that. And what they do is they call until they get 1,200, 1,500 people to answer. They ask them the questions, and they're generally getting people who are, at home, not doing anything, not paying attention, more than likely. So always take polling numbers with a grain of salt. That's the message.
Election cycle in November, is this going to be an issue that people are going to be voting on? How concerned are people at home about this? And I think
somebody asked me, could Biden be doing all this to try to stay in power, keep Democrats in power? That's always something that has to be considered.
Shane, let's go to you for what we've heard from Vladimir Putin. Okay, so can you talk to us about Vladimir Putin's latest speech? Because
Biden's officially 30 minutes late from when he was supposed to talk.
Kremlin watchers, people who are used to sort of watching and listening to the Russian president. Break it down for us.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long speech, didactic, preachy, and just, riddled with historical inaccuracies and false claims that Putin has made about the history of Ukraine in the past.
Now, he says historically inaccurate and false claims. Again, it depends on which side you're looking from, because if you are Russian, what Putin said was true about Russia. If you're looking at it from the perspective of the West, things may not be as we think with Putin. Okay, if you're looking at the point of view of the West, it could be potentially inaccurate. But from the Russian point of view, he could be stating what Russians believe. Just because we don't believe it doesn't mean they don't, in other words.
Was a kind of logic for invading the whole country, frankly, which I think is what really, as far as kind of Kremlin watchers got them alarmed, is that he wasn't merely talking about sending troops into these eastern regions to secure them and to protect what he now declares as their independence from a sovereign country, Ukraine. He seemed to be articulating an argument for regime change. And that is kind of the maximalist approach that White House and European officials have been most worried about, that he would not just send troops into the east, but that he would try and do a full-fledged invasion of the entire country and ultimately topple the Zelensky government in Kyiv and perhaps replace it with one that was more favorable to Moscow. That speech yesterday seemed to be kind of laying out, in Putin's sort of bizarre rendering of history, the intellectual foundations to justify a war and to justify seizing another country. Again, we will see in the coming days, obviously, what.
That's been the scariest thing to me, was Putin's speech yesterday, if you watched that.
So expansive in the way that Russia was asserting some kind of dominion over Ukraine.
And Gene, is that alarm, does it extend beyond Ukraine? I mean, with that justification, could Vladimir Putin lay the groundwork in the case of trying to invade other countries?
Yeah, he might, and at the very least, it's that kind of bellicose rhetoric that makes people think that this is not a Russian president with small ambitions. Of course, the ultimate nightmare, and we should be careful to say that there's no reason to believe that he would go and invade another country bordering Ukraine, but it is exactly that he would somehow be able to invade and hold Ukraine, which, by the way, is a diced.
It's not that far-fetched. He's already got Belarus, basically. He's already got Georgia. He's annexed Crimea. It's not that far-fetched to think he would take back the Baltics and possibly even Moldavia. So people saying they know what's going to happen, you have to question.
Rhetoric, that almost kind of imperialist kind of nostalgia that Putin evinces so often for Ukraine, that has people very worried about what he might want to do next, because it doesn't necessarily look like the work of a rational actor to send 200,000 troops into a sovereign country when he probably doesn't have much chance of holding on to it.
Well, joining us now is national political correspondent Olivier Knox. Olivier, let's talk about the United States and its allies, its partners. What is the relationship and the strength like right now among these countries that are watching what's happening in Ukraine, and they're either threatening sanctions or threatening to act? This is a test.
It sure is. And as we speak here, President Biden, we're expecting him to come out. He's coming out a few hours after Germany, the European Union, and the United Kingdom all announced sanctions on actors in this crisis, on Russia, on Russian banks, on a handful of oligarchs and other similar targets. We think that the administration is going to be announcing its own new package of sanctions, sort of either in Biden's speech or shortly thereafter. But actually, some of the real action may be in the Far East, where there are now reports that Japan, Singapore, and Taiwan are all on board to a greater or lesser degree with imposing export restrictions of microchips, for example, to Russia, on which Russia is considerably dependent. So we're seeing a lot of the allies that the Biden administration is counting on in this united front against Russia's actions in Ukraine. We're seeing some steps, but so far, at least out of Europe, I haven't seen anything that makes me stop and say, whoa, now they're really going for it.
Olivier, in your daily tour.
Okay, I'm just going to pause that for a minute, pop back over to the chat. You guys chatting amongst yourselves. Cool. All right. If I'm not mistaken, he said he feels that Ukraine already signed the papers with the U.S., and this is why the U.S. is sending Ukraine weapons. Then the same thing happened in war with Japan. We've been sending weapons. We've been sending weapons to Ukraine for quite some time. So is the UK. What did Russia say in his speech yesterday? Now, the speech that I heard, he said he knows he can't beat NATO force. Yeah, he said a lot in the speech yesterday. Thunder. He talked about the history of Russia. He talked about Stalin. He talked about Lenin. He talked about the Russian Empire. He talked about the greatness of the Russian Empire. He talked about reestablishing the Russian Empire, which basically would be taking over the majority of countries on the current Russian border, reestablishing the old Soviet Union. And we've got to remember to always take into account Putin's history. Putin was KBG. He was the equivalent of our CIA. And just as George Herbert Walker Bush led our CIA and then became our president, and some shady and questionable things happened under that Bush regime, the same thing is true in Russia, with Putin having been KGB and will always be KGB. So you can't really take much of anything off the table when you consider Putin. The one thing I want completely off the table is nuclear weapons, and we as a world are going to have to start pressing for that, because situations like this just show us how vulnerable the world is to a mistake. Somebody misinterpreting an order, somebody flying into a no-fly zone, somebody going rogue. I hope not, Thin Blue Line family, but I think it probably is. And at the moment, it's just not an active shooting war. I hope it doesn't get to that place. But when you hear all these sanctions that are happening, when you hear about all the potential consequences to Russia, while they are not going to be bothered by some of them, when you start talking about messing with computer chips and electronics and things that make the current modern world function, Russia will take notice of that. And I don't think Russia thought the Asian countries would get involved, and I didn't think they would either. That's why I paused this. That's why I cut the audio when I heard that, because I didn't think the Asian countries would get involved, but it seems like they are. So I'm going to pop back over here. Again, Biden was scheduled to speak at 12:45. As you can see down here, live at 12:45 p.m. Biden updates on Russia, Ukraine. It's currently 1:24. I'm going to pop back on here to see what the Washington Post is saying.
Troops will face an insurgency. They will face resistance. So there's a lot of open questions. One of them is, will Putin try to install a government to oust Vladimir Zelensky? Or based on the speech that Shane was talking about earlier, will he just pull Ukraine into Russia? There are a lot of open questions in that regard.
All right, let's go back to Shane Harris. Shane, can you talk a little more about this question of the pain that other countries could feel, the United States could feel, whether it's sort of the reality of what sanctions would mean in terms of shutting off supplies, but also let's talk about retribution that Russia could enact, cyber crimes, cyber security.
Sure, yeah. Obviously the pain will be particularly pronounced in countries in Europe that rely heavily on Russia for supplies of natural gas. And you've seen, I think prices spiking in anticipation of an invasion and of sanctions as well. Russia is a major exporter of wheat on the global market. Does that mean we're going to see higher prices for bread and other products on U.S. shelves? Possibly. We're already in a pretty massive cycle of inflation right now. This probably won't help. Events like this tend to have a destabilizing effect. Also important to put into context, of course, Russia is not a giant economy. It is not an insignificant one, but it's not one of the global powerhouses. So there is going to be some pain. There's no doubt about that. Russian retaliation and retribution is a really interesting question. Obviously, we have seen for years now Russian cyber crime condoned by the Russian government, some would argue enabled by it, directed against the United States. That's not anything new. Would Russia, though, retaliate against U.S. businesses or U.S. computer networks because of American sanctions or American support for Ukraine? Sure, I think that's entirely possible. I have talked to some sources who don't necessarily have any direct intelligence on that, but are kind of factoring that into a possibility, and that might elicit some other kind of American response. And it's important to remember too that even absent the crisis in Ukraine, the United States has been very clear that if Russia were ever to do something like try to knock out power to an American city or launch an attack on a piece of critical infrastructure, that would also draw its own response, and potentially one a cyber response or a military one. So all these kinds of factors are in play. But at the same time, the Biden administration, I think, has sort of prepared the American public for that by saying for months now that it would unleash these devastating, crippling sanctions on Russia. That's given the markets and I think a lot of American businesses time to sort of prepare for that and to understand that this is going to be the consequence if Putin does invade Ukraine. So that won't come as a surprise. It won't necessarily minimize the pain either.
Okay, that's what I was getting ready to say. Yeah, it may not. Some of us that are paying attention may expect it to happen. That doesn't mean we're going to be happy when it happens, or be happy that we're right. Okay, just because we say it's going to be happening, we're not going to be overjoyed when it happens. We're going to be pissed, and the world's already pissed. The entire world. There's so much angst. There's so much division. There's so much negativity. There's so much hate. The world is already pissed. We don't need triggers to take us down other paths, in my opinion.
Of invasion of a country. So in that sense, the throw weight that the Russians have is perhaps greater than the size of their GDP or their military presence might suggest. It's also, though, an increasingly isolated country. It's one reason why I think Western observers in particular find what Vladimir Putin is doing as so potentially counter to Russia's long-term interests, because he doesn't count many countries left as close allies. You have, Belarus, which is effectively, like the last dictatorship in Europe, and then a kind of tenuous, though strong, relationship with China, which could be strengthened by an invasion of Ukraine. It also might be weakened. I mean, the Chinese government has notably not come out and said they are in support of Russian military action in Ukraine. So Russia is sort of in this, I would argue probably.
Okay, China's important. China, we heard last night, the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations, he spoke for just under 2 minutes, where everybody else was speaking for 20, 30 minutes. And he just basically said it needs to be solved peacefully. While China didn't say they approved of what Putin was doing, they didn't say they disapproved either. That's a point that needs to be made clear when all this is seems like pending going down.
The East Room to make remarks. Olivier, let's talk about relationships that Vladimir Putin has outside of his country, and also how the pandemic may have affected his mindset, or this.
Okay, I'm gonna flop over here for a second. This is one of the guys I watch on occasion. I don't watch him very long because he gets out there every once in a while.
I don't know where he heard that. Let me try to get that for you. Wow.
Okay, seems like, I'm glad I flipped over there. Seems like it's been delayed until 2 o'clock now.
I haven't seen that reported elsewhere. Hang on, folks.
I'm going to stay with this guy for a second and see if he's got a report so I don't have to go searching.
That's strange, too. That's very strange, too.
Biden was supposed to speak at 12:45. It's now 1:31.
Okay, now
it's been delayed.
Joyce Karam says Biden delayed, no due time has been given, pool waiting to be gathered.
Okay. She's Joyce is a reporter there. So, all right.
Unbelievable. I wanted to show you something from Rob Lee really quick.
Rob
Lee commented that we were talking about this. He said this recent video apparently taken today seemed to show air defense systems. He said, again, air defense systems being dispersed in an elevated alert status to defend different ground units is just one more bad sign. Many of the videos over the past few days of Russian units near Ukraine have shown military columns with organic air defense assets.
Okay. So, I don't know when he's going to speak now. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and close down this this short live, and I will pop back up when I get word, if I get word that Biden's going to be speaking. Russia has 50 plus missiles, each capable of destroying a landmass the size of Texas, that have launched in Russia would land in the U.S. in less than 20 minutes. That's true. Russia has enough nuclear material to kill the world 5 to 10 times over. That's true as well. Government study came out this morning linking COVID-19 to 5G radiation. I'm going to have to check that out. Okay. Yeah, the United States has about 7 to 8,000 nuclear missiles. Russia has between 6 and 7,000. And a lot of the missiles are multi-warhead missiles, meaning they can target, one missile can target various parts of a city or various cities. So yeah, it's while I'm not setting my hair on fire, I'm also taking this very seriously. I just try to remain calm about things and not get all caught up in it. Because when you get caught up in things, you sometimes lose critical thinking. And in order to analyze things, you need to look at both sides of things. So that's kind of what approach I'm trying to take. Thank you all for watching. We will be back when Biden speaks. If I don't have it live, I will have it. And I will be back live today. It's Tuesday, the 22nd of February, 222 in the year 22. So where can I buy me one of them bunkers? You may be late. It may be too late to get a bunker put in. I don't know. I hope not. I love you all sincerely. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for being here. We don't have the biggest show on the internet by far, but we've got the best audience, and I thank you all. I love you all, and we will be back. It's the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like, and hit that bell so you know when we come back on. We will be back on later on today. It's the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. It's a dark world. Do try to be a light. I love you all. Peace.